Recording.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Joel Siegel. I'm co-director of the COVID-19 Emergency Response Group. The first thing I want to do is I want to thank every single person who has attended our town hall meetings, our symposiums. Nelson Mandela used to say, together we're stronger than alone. And together we've been very successful in moving the Congress towards more human-centric policies in terms of people being mistreated by the system in terms of dealing with COVID-19. I'm very humble. I'm just gonna be honest with you. When I see Jeffrey Sachs and I see Jen Sue and so many other people, I'm very humbled to be present because you guys are my heroes. I just want to say that we're in a situation now where we have an administration that has no national strategy on testing, treating, no New Deal, Franklin Delano Roosevelt safety net. We know that COVID-19 is adversely killing and infecting people of color. And what we want to do today is we want everyone to check in to let us know, what are you doing to get passage of the HEROES Act, especially the Senate bill. They want to do $1 trillion, Democrats want to do $3 trillion. And if we do not figure out a way to form a united front, as Martin Luther King would call it, a beloved family, as someone who worked in Congress for 13 years, it's only raw political power where constituents are calling their members of Congress and putting pressure on them is when you get legislation either passed or killed. The other thing I want to point out is it simply is a mythology and based on what Paul Krugman calls intellectual confusion, that you can't pressure Republicans to change their policy. It's just not true because there are Republican families that are dying of COVID, the Republican families who don't have housing, the Republican families who don't have food. So one thing we're going to have to do once we go for our reporting, and Paul's going to lead us, is we're going to have to come up with an action plan and do the best that we can, and maybe God and the universe will help us to approve that HEROES Act. And we also want to remain together post-COVID-19, but we're going to be together for a long time. I also want to thank Paul Zeitz, Paul, for your leadership and keeping us all together. This is a very noble cause. It's called saving human life. And if we all work together, we're going to do God's work and we're going to make this country a better country, but we can't work on our silos anymore. That's not going to work. And I hope that Jean Sue can explain how she's been able to bring in over 600 to 700 organizations to lobby the Congress, because that's what we need to do. I love you all. God bless everyone. Look forward to your presentations. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joel, for opening us up like that. Today's session is called Mobilizing Bold Action to Combat the COVID-19 Pandemic and Ensure a Green and Just Economic Recovery. As Joel said, the U.S. National COVID-19 Emergency Response Group was formed by all of us in March of this year, and we're mobilizing the people's voice to save as many lives as possible, ensure health for all, and spark an economic recovery that creates jobs for a 21st century new energy economy and protects us from the impact of the climate emergency. We are going to be doing these monthly action updates from now, July through December, and please join our Facebook group, Google group, and website. As we all know, the HEROES Act is coming back to life before Congress, and we are thrilled today to have the many experts who are working at the global, national, and local level to drive transformative action to address these crises that we're facing. So I've invited them to provide laser advocacy updates and action that people can take. And we do want to cultivate coming together and figuring out, and I want to put this out there as an opening question for you all to respond to as you see fit, is can we do something unified? Is there a way that we can act as a collective unified movement in relationship to the HEROES Act, in relationship to the political campaigns that are coming up and conventions in August, and then of course the exciting fall ahead. So that's an open question for us to get your feedback on. So with that opening, I'm gonna call on our first speaker, Professor Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia University. who's going to talk about the newly formed Lancet Commission on promoting solutions to improve public health and support economic recovery, which he is the co-chair of. Jeff?
Paul, thanks very much. Thanks to all the colleagues. Actually, I want to talk about two things that I think are vital for our legislation, and then I'll mention the Lancet Commission at the end. It's obvious, but still worth emphasizing, we do not have a national public health strategy to suppress the epidemic. And we are now with about 250 cases per million population per day. And this is 2 orders of magnitude or more higher than in countries around the world that have suppressed the epidemic. In East Asia, in China, Japan, and Korea, there are fewer than 1 case per million per day. We're more than 200 cases per million per day. And of course, our death rates are rising again. There's not more to be said on why this is. It's because we have a psychopath as president. The question is what to do in this context until we have President Biden. And Congress has not succeeded in even really expressing itself on public health. Congress has voted lots of money for lots of projects, but not on public health. There has been no clear congressional leadership on public health. The difference of the United States and the other countries is that in the successful countries, there are national policies on public health measures, testing, tracing, quarantine, physical distancing, online applications to support these processes, other measures of social support, and so on. We have no national policies. It's unbelievable after 140,000 deaths, but that is the truth. We need in this legislation not just money for people suffering, how important that is, of course, but we need public health strategy. As if there weren't this psychopath in the White House, what would we do? Let's get congressional leaders for the first time to have a proper public health strategy. This includes 3 basic points. 1, the components of public health, as I've mentioned, which range from masks and tracing and contacting and quarantining, safe workspaces, and so forth. Second, instead of this White House task force, which is, there isn't even an adjective for it, that is for this company, we need a national commission established by Congress of our top public health specialists around the country to take a leadership position. And third, we need financing for these measures. Cities and states should not be scrambling to say, how can I afford to increase tenfold the amount of contact tracing I'm doing? This should be without a question of budget. So my first plea in this legislation, and it's shocking to have to make it in the middle of July when an epidemic has been raging for months, is public health chapter in this new legislation. National public health strategy. Understanding we have none right now. The second is we need financial support for many, many things. And I just want to add the obvious, we need financial support for state and local governments to be able to run schools, police departments, clinics, anything. They are bereft of revenues all over the country because of the economic collapse. And so we need the one place where we can get financing, which is a federal government backed by the Federal Reserve Board, to be providing revenues for state and local governments. These are the 2 pleas. There are many other things to do with individual assistance, with social support and all the rest. But I cannot believe that we do not have in the Democratic House of Representatives a public health plan. And we don't. And we need to. And as Joel said, maybe it would even be bipartisan, because it's Republicans and Democrats are dying all over this country right now and getting infected all over this country and realizing we have no strategy all over this country. So these are the 2 points I wanted to make. Just in closing, I'll be chairing an international commission, a global commission for Lancet called the Lancet COVID-19 Commission. It aims at all of the pillars of suppressing the epidemic, protecting those who are extraordinarily vulnerable, and that's billions of people around the world, addressing the growing financial crisis that is arising out of this, because the shadow of debt of households, of businesses, and especially of governments is absolutely a long-term catastrophe in the building. And then, as Paul said, to have a green, inclusive recovery. So those are the 4 pillars of the Lancet Commission work. And I would be delighted to hear from any and all of you. My email is simple, sachs@columbia.edu. There will be plenty of work to do in this commission, and I will be delighted if you would let me know about your interest and availability. But this is a global effort, and it's got a lot of resonance around the world, and I would be grateful to work together with you. Paul, thanks to you, and back to you.
Thanks, Professor Sachs. We're really excited about the commission. I think it could have a big impact here in the U.S. as well as we enter a transitional political environment.
Absolutely.
So I hope that we can all leverage that opportunity. Okay, thanks. So I'm going to go, again, for those of you who are joining, we're going to have all the speakers speak in the first hour, and then we'll have a half hour for discussion for those that are left around. But I'm going to go next to Shanice Bamiro, who's a policy fellow in the office of Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and she's leading the effort on HCON Resolution 100 to establish a U.S. Commission on Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. And this got introduced on June 4th in the wake of the George Floyd murder. So over to you, Shanice.
Awesome. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So again, thank you, Paul, for inviting me on the call and partnering with our office. So the Truth, Healing, Racial Healing, and Reconciliation and Transformation Bill, basically what it does is it recognizes the racial harm that has happened in America and establishes a commission to study what would help us heal the harms in America. So when we first dropped the bill, we had over 120 co-sponsors, and now we're at 137, thanks to some really great work from our groups and our partners like Paul, and we're on our way to 218, so we can have very strong support, and have been working with our partners to target as many members as possible. So next week is Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Week, established by really great partners. So we're bringing a lot of attention to the issue in order to push, to do a push for, more co-sponsors to get us closer to 218. And in that, we're having a tweet storm, again, to bring attention to the issue and establish why we really need that in America. And so I'm really happy to coordinate with anybody who wants to help us. And I can give you all the Dear Colleague letter, as well as a target list of members that we are trying to reach out to and get them to co-sponsor the bill. And that's pretty much it. I'm open for questions, but really want to thank you, you all, for your support. And thank you, Paul, for inviting us again.
Thanks, Shanice. And I know this goes without saying, but we know that people of color, Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Native Americans are all being disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And there's some interrelationship between the response to the George Floyd murder and the COVID pandemic. And so I think that's why I felt like it was important for you to bring this forward on this call. And there are many cities around the country that are also bringing forward truth, racial healing, and transformation processes So I think it's important opportunity as we think about how to build the political will that Joel called us to develop in the beginning of the call. So I'm going to jump over to Chris Collins. He's got a short fuse timeline. He's going to talk about U.S. support for the global response to the pandemic. Thanks, Chris. He's the executive director of Friends of the Global Fight to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria.
Thank you, Paul. Hi, everybody. I will be really brief and very happy to provide any information. I'll put my email in the chat box. Basically, we've got an urgent situation with the need to get global financing in the Senate supplemental bill. Up to now, Congress has done next to nothing in terms of funding the global COVID response. We're hearing daily about service disruption to AIDS, TB, and malaria programs. The Lancet is estimating now that death rates from AIDS, TB, and malaria could go up 10, 20, 30% by those diseases. We could lose 10 years of progress against those diseases. And of course, the impacts in terms of poverty and nutrition are potentially catastrophic. We've got to have the US Congress step up and fund, be part of the global response. The US Global Leadership Coalition and the whole global health community is rallying behind an ask of $20 billion. There's a lot of support for global peace in the Senate bill. Actually, there was a bipartisan Senate letter signed by, I think, 24 senators just last week that came out. I can send anyone the link who wants that letter. Bottom line, so far in the supplementals thus far, about 0.1% of the money total has gone to global. If we were to put $20 billion in another $1 trillion bill, that would bring the grand total percentage of global in the supplementals to 0.5%. So not even 0.5%, even if we get our ask. Every year, about 1% of the US budget is international assistance. We've got a pandemic on our hands, by definition, a global crisis. We need to be stepping up the investment. I will end it there just to say that, I think there is support. I think McConnell's looking seriously at a global piece of this legislation, but the question is, what will the level be? And we really think it's got to be at least 20 billion, and we've got to get that message to Senator McConnell. So thank you, Paul, and I'll put my info in the chat box.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Please do send me those links, and I will do a follow-up email to everyone with all those appropriate links. And thanks for your leadership on that. And I think this is a big question about the U.S. role in the world, and are we going to step up and contribute to the global response, including with some of our wealth. So with that, thanks for everyone for keeping on time. We're really doing really well. We're moving fast through the speakers list. I'm going to turn it over next to Mayor Jennifer Roberts, former mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina, a leader at Echo America and in her Pathways program, but also much broader, a leader in the mayors and county networks, and as well a leader in an economic and green just recovery. So Jennifer, please.
Thanks for having me today, Paul, and I will try to keep with a program of being under my 5 minutes. It's fascinating. What we're seeing around the country is that in the absence, in the vacuum of federal leadership, we're seeing local leadership. And so even many of the states that finally implemented mask requirements were kind of prompted by the mayors in those states. In Texas, Washington, California, even mayors are doing it first because they're on the ground, they see it happening. So unfortunately, a lot of the aid packages have gone through states and have not gone directly to cities. So obviously cities and counties are asking for aid to go directly to them. They are seeing 15 to 20% budget cuts already, even before, the second wave of economic hardship hits. Because the tax deadline was extended to July 15th, many states are going to be seeing what their actual holes are in the next week. They're going to be getting those revenues finally and seeing that they've got 20% reductions. I know that the state of North Carolina is looking at a $4 billion shortfall. That's an estimate. So what cities are asking for is direct assistance. They're asking for $500 billion in the next relief package. We have 19,000 cities in America, and it's everything from infrastructure to housing to the opioid crisis, tax policy. There's that $10,000 limit on the exemption of state and local taxes, which has impacted cities and counties. They also want to make sure that they get the tax exempt municipal bonds still in there. There are all kinds of hijinks going on in that tax package that cities and counties are finally beginning to realize. There is a challenge with flood insurance. We talk about climate change and what's coming to cities. We're in hurricane season, we're in COVID season. All these things are multiple crises. Our cities and our counties are really distressed. But even amidst of all that, they're leading. So it's great to see people stepping up. They are looking for clean energy grants. There is actually, for the U.S. Conference of Mayors, there's a whole section on clean energy that they want the nation, and they're lobbying Congress. The mayors are lobbying Congress, the cities are, and the counties are. They're looking for national greenhouse gas standards and reduction, looking for a national renewable portfolio standard, tax incentives and credits, and that sort of thing. The other thing that cities and counties are dealing with is water infrastructure. We saw it in Flint, Detroit, and other places, but what happens when revenues fall is that cities cannot maintain their water systems. And so there's also funding for infrastructure, including that water infrastructure and water systems. That's really, really important. Education is suffering. We know that kids are not going back to school, or they're going back in staggered places. We've got the governor of Georgia suing the mayors for requiring masks and trying to get kids back in schools. So let's see some of the other things. Counties are also asking, when we talk about public health, the Federal Medical Assistance Program, those funds are supposed to end at the end of this month. They're asking for an extension to September 2021 because cities and counties know that the recession is just starting and that these folks are going to be needing that medical assistance. That serves 70 million people, that federal medical assistance program. And even things like broadband and mental health are being lobbied for by cities and counties. Interesting fact that I discovered in looking up some of the things for today, 2/3 of America's counties, 2/3 have poverty rates that exceed the national average. So again, this is, years of tax policy, et cetera, that are really concentrating wealth. And this burdens all of our cities and counties. So finally, there was a little bit of request for election support because, again, people are worried about not having money for good machines, not having money for poll workers, having PPE for poll workers, et cetera. So we got a lot of work to do. That's my quick summary. And I put a lot of, I gave Paul a lot of links for some of the policy platforms of the cities and counties. Obviously I always push, we need to build back better, but the green recovery is going to be really important. The last thing I put in the resource group was that the Democratic National Committee is looking for support for the recommendations from the Climate and Environment Policy Committee, because it's all about a green recovery, and it covers everything from health to housing to resilience to workforce and clean energy and pollution. So take a look at that as well in your resource list. Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor Roberts. A quick clarification, and then we're going to go to the next speaker. Sorry, we'll do a question. This is a clarifying question. You said $500 billion is being asked for. Is that just for city governments, or is that also for county governments?
That is actually a request for cities. And cities feel so left out. They actually, their campaign, National League of Cities, their campaign was cities are essential. Like they had to remind people that cities are essential. That was the name of their campaign. So the cities alone are asking for $500 billion.
Thank you very much. Okay, to complement your presentation, we're thrilled today to have Jim Walsh, Senior Energy Policy Analyst with Food and Water Watch. Jim, can you give us your perspectives on what's happening next week?
Sure. Thank you very much for pulling this together and having me. I want to, what we're looking at, the Senate Republicans are going to be opening up debate in the Senate, and there's a chance this policy may pass by the end of the month. And what we're seeing, what I'm here to talk about really is the Rewind Act and the fossil fuel bailout that's been going on in Congress. And there are the typical things that we've seen and have been highlighting happening in these bailouts, what the Trump administration is doing, such as regulatory rollbacks like the NEPA policy that just passed that will essentially fast track a lot of fossil fuel projects and other infrastructure projects without requiring environmental review to understand those programs. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is something the administration has talked about doing, and they've actually had the Department of Energy do a study to evaluate whether the Strategic Petroleum Reserve could actually hold all the oil they wanted to hold to justify purchasing oil for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve without the congressional allocations. There's been royalty reductions significantly from public land extraction. They've been distributing literally billions of dollars through the CARES Act funding that's supposed to go to support a variety of unemployed workers and through the Paycheck Protection Program, as well as the Federal Reserve specifically offering loans and other sorts of disbursements to fossil fuel entities. The big thing that we're expecting the Senate to push really hard on that has been a major discussion point is liability waivers. And the devil's in the details about what is going to come out with these liability waivers. The fossil fuel industry is, there's active efforts right now going on in litigation to hold the industry accountable for the climate impacts and other sorts of impacts the industry's causing. These liability waivers could potentially create a dynamic where spills that happen during fracking operations or pipelines during COVID-19 are they're not held accountable for these things, and this could potentially impact that litigation by essentially giving them this place where it's like, oh well, can you prove it didn't happen in this time when we had the liability, right? And there's also and that's happening, but then there's also congressional bailouts that have been teed up in the very recently. That we need to be conscious of that may be attached to this as further giveaways to the fossil fuel industry. And that's the 45Q tax credit. This is the Use It Act, which is a policy that would greatly streamline regulations for carbon capture, sequestration, and utilization. For people who don't know, this is a process where they would essentially place carbon capture equipment on existing power plants, capture that CO2, and then the major plan for the CO2 is to ship it to oil drillers who would use that to actually, for a process called enhanced oil recovery, while they pump the CO2 in the earth as a way to extract every last bit of oil, and they call this carbon neutral oil drilling, which is crazy, but it would help to streamline regulations to allow the fossil fuel industry to take further advantage of the tax credits underneath that. We think there's maybe another push for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And then there's also just generally the complicity that exists within the Democrats for actually reining in the Trump administration's, bailout of the industry, right? So when the House passed the HEROES Act, it did not include the Rewind Act. And the Rewind Act actually addresses a lot of these major problems. Looking at stopping the Federal Reserve slush fund for fossil fuel interests, reducing and stopping royalty reductions and the regulatory rollbacks that the administration is putting forward, stopping any purchases for the oil purchases for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and then also stopping banks from buying and flipping oil assets, which is something that we're seeing banks gearing up to do. Banks are actually hiring former oil executives to actually look to run these oil companies that have been failing at very low prices. These Wall Street banks then would hold on to these assets when prices recover and then flip them and resell them for more down the road, probably to some of the larger drillers who did not go under because they had better capitalization rates. And so what we expect to happen, is the Senate bill will probably prioritize the liability protection. There's also been, they're probably going to provide some resources for jobs, potentially for healthcare. And then one of the places that, isn't related to the fossil fuels, but the state aid has been something that's been talked about pretty significantly, and particularly states like New Mexico, North Dakota, who are very dependent on oil revenue from drilling and are suffering because of that. And the state aid may wind up taking the form of resources for schools, because there's a big push to get kids back to school. So it may potentially be linked to education funding. There's also a push to cut the capital gains tax for millionaires and tax cuts for millionaires. But one of the things that we're hearing is that the people don't expect that McConnell's plan will actually include any language specifically on fossil fuels or energy in general. So the status quo may be what's introduced, which is literally billions of dollars flowing to the oil and gas industry, however the Trump administration deems to do so, which is also unacceptable. The things that we need folks to do, there needs to be quick real-time response to the details as they come out. Food and Water Action, as well as some of our allies on the Hill, including you guys, have regular calls and communications about, what's going on with this. And we'll be sharing that information out with folks. And I think it's important to, respond to that quickly on social media. And I think that the people need to be hitting most on this are Schumer and McConnell. Need to be the priorities, the leadership. Everybody across the country can hear from them. Representative Pelosi is also important, even though she's not in the Senate. She is a top negotiator in this with the House. And then any champions that you guys have. So the local chapters, if you have close relationships with offices, you need to tell them, make this a priority and move this forward. I don't want to share broader targeting information on this call beyond that, but if there's individuals who want that broader targeting information, we can certainly share that individual with people. I just encourage you to reach out to me or Russell and or whoever, at PDA do that, and we can work to get you that information more directly. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. That was like a full throttle overview of a lot of complex topics that are being manipulated through this COVID relief package process. So thanks for updating us about all that. And if you could include in the chat here or email me links to those policy demands that you were describing, I think that's really important for us to share to the broader group that, to build awareness and then build political pressure to keep on those topics. So great. So we have three more speakers in the next few minutes. So I'm gonna build on something you were talking about, children's issues and education. We're gonna go to Denise Edwards next, and then we'll come up with Jean, and then we'll wrap up this first hour with Meredith. Denise is the policy director with the National Children's Alliance, and she's part of Keep Kids Safe, that's focusing on ensuring children are safe from sexual violence during the time of COVID. And she can give us an update on the children's issues that are being debated as part of the next COVID relief package. Denise, oh, there you are, okay.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. And I'm glad to hear that Paul sent around that your colleague and the letter that we had sent out that had organizations signed on that we've sent to the Hill. In a quick nutshell, when COVID happened and everything started shutting down, it meant kids were at home with their families, and in some cases, then that exacerbated abuse happening that was either potentially already there, or in the case of, especially on child sexual abuse, it allowed for folks to be able to abuse and not have to worry about kids going to school and potential for mandatory reports. The largest percentage group of mandatory reporters are our teachers. And so when children are not in front of them, the reports are going down. So we know we don't know exactly how much abuse has gone on in the homes, and now that they've been out of school, but we do know that there's likely an increase especially in child sexual abuse. RAIN, the Rape Abuse Incest National Network, has reported that for the first time ever, the majority of the people contacting them are minors to report sexual assault. So there is an effort to try to highlight this issue specifically for a need within the COVID package, but actually also to in the longer term to get it on everybody's radar screen, because a lot of times people talk about child abuse, but it can get lost in a larger child welfare debate. And so we're trying to specifically highlight child sexual abuse and the need for that. And so there's a push to try to get some funding in COVID for that in a number of different areas, but specifically in the criminal justice side of things. There's a couple of programs within the CJS budget that fund child abuse and specifically child sexual abuse. What we've been able to do is to get Grace Ming, Representative Ming, to insert some language in the House CJS appropriations bill that highlights that while there's not any money specifically targeted at it, it did provide a paragraph that said that we know that kids are being abused, and now with the onset of the pandemic and kids being at home, the likelihood of kids either being sexually abused or exploited online is only increasing. And so there's also a movement now to focus on getting Senate support to try to get it in the Senate version package to be able to get some dollars to address this. Just as we move forward, knowing that these programs that are out there are going to need additional resources to be able to respond to the likely increase of cases that are out there. So I can spend a whole lot more time on that at another time. I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to say something. One thing I want to say, if Shanice is still on, your boss, Congresswoman Lee, has been such a big supporter for children for a long time. So I just want to say thank you. So I'll stop there and turn it back over.
Thank you, Denise. I really appreciate your work and your leadership on moving those agendas forward. I think all this call reminds me about the complex nature of the pandemic and all the ripples effect and the political processes and how all these issues are linked. And our movements are operating in silos, however. You're doing that, this one's doing that, everyone's operating in their own kind of silo. And I think what Joel and I and others in the COVID-19 emergency response group have been advocating for is can we come together and link these efforts so that we can actually start winning some of these battles. So to that, for that possibility, I want to go next to Jean Sue, who's been a real leader during this COVID response and before as the director of the Energy Justice Program at the Center for Biological Diversity. She's been a keynote speaker on many of our prior calls and our town hall webinars. And Jean, you're like energizer. So energize us and let us know what else we can do to protect people and heal America. Over to you.
Wow, that's a tall order, Paul. But thank you for having me, and great to be back. And Joel and Russell, great to see everyone, and of course Jennifer and all. So I am one of the people heading up a nationwide campaign on the utility shutoffs moratorium. Jim, we work very closely with the Food and Water Watch crew on this, so it's fabulous to see the fossil fuel side represented here too. So essentially, Jennifer already unpacked this. Essentially, we have the threat of people experiencing shutoffs right now on their water, their electricity, and their broadband, all three things that are absolutely critical to actually fight the COVID crisis, but also are getting totally, is just totally essential for the climate-induced stuff that is happening right now in terms of heat waves. So people will not be able to survive this summer if they do not have electricity and air conditioning. And you can see how all of these factors are compounding to basically make this a fatal time for everyone, especially communities of color. So what are we doing about this? A bunch of us organized really hard and essentially gathered 830 groups across the country to get legislation enacted in the HEROES Act. We won, we succeeded. So there is a nationwide moratorium in the HEROES Act in the House. And now what we have in front of us is a Senate battle. So, a lot of people are going to say, well, Mitch McConnell is not going to give that to you. But what we are actually proposing is that this is a baseline ask that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi cannot throw under the bus. These are basic fucking human rights. These should not be partisan in any way. This is people's electricity, water, and broadband. So how are we making that happen? Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, so how are we making So we have an escalation plan coming up. And I will send you all these details in the chat right now and also send it to Paul. So Senate is back on Monday. Senator Merkley is introducing a version of the national moratorium on Tuesday. On Tuesday, we're also having an activist webinar at 8 p.m. ET, where you will be hearing from activists to tell you what to do for call to action. And then on Wednesday, we will have our day of action. So this means massive calls into Senate, and we will keep that drumbeat going on for the next 2 to 3 weeks after. So, everybody here knows the calls matter and the emails matter. So we will have all of those for people to basically use and call. The second thing that we're doing to get on the record for this is actually making and rolling out a series of videos where we're going to have them, senators talking to impacted folks. So Senator Warren has done and Senator Merkley will be doing this next week. And Senator Schumer we're trying to get him on the hook. He actually already tweeted about this, so we're trying to get him to do this interview. And it basically is a way for a senator to talk to somebody who has lost their electricity, water, or broadband, and make them, basically publicly on the hook to actually defend this and not throw it under the bus. And then the third thing, and so we'd love, that is rolling out in production right now, and we'd love for people to retweet and share that. And the third thing, for those in DC, we are going to be headed to Mitch McConnell's house the third week of all of this with all of our honking horns. So please get in touch with me if you want to be part of that car caravan. And so I guess that is it. And I hope I'm in my 5 minutes.
Wow, yes. I mean, I'm like, I have chills running through my body. Yes, I want to be part of the car caravan for sure. So please send me that. That's fantastic. This energy that we're sharing on this call today is like, how do we harness it with the whole movement coming together to win all these battles, That's the question I want to pose to all of you. Great, so we have, I'm really honored for our next speaker, Meredith Dobson, who I've known for 20 years now. And she's my go-to on domestic policy. She's the policy director at the Results Education Fund, and she's going to focus today on emergency food security, housing, and tax policies to complement all this other agenda setting that we've been hearing about. So Meredith, over to you. And then we do have a couple more people that are late-breaking speakers that we want to get in, including Alan Minsky and Greg Paulus, about other issues that are pressing for next week. So over to you, Meredith.
Great, thanks, Paul. And I have actually a couple slides, so hopefully folks will be able to follow along. Really excited to join many of you. Follow Jean. Really excited to maybe go honk horns since I also live in the DC area. I have the slides are something we put together for our grassroots network for our national webinar last Saturday, but I think should give some context to kind of the timing of the negotiations and who are some of the key players. So I'm going to do host is disabled screen sharing. Can we turn it back on? Or you could run them for me, Paul.
There you go. Sorry. I didn't mean to do that. It was not planned. Go ahead. It should work now.
All right. Do you see my?
Yeah. Yes.
And is it big enough that everyone can see it?
Now it is. That's
Great.
Better.
Okay, so I just figured I'd start with a title slide to mostly make sure things worked and make sure folks knew how to find us on social media channels to engage. So the first piece I wanted just to mention and was really appreciate everything that Barbara Lee does, appreciated the remarks earlier. I wanted to underscore within here in the United States, kind of the level of hardship that folks are facing, but that also these economic challenges, this crisis is not felt equally, nor has it been in previous recessions. So this chart just looks over time, kind of the comparison of unemployment rates for Black Americans and white Americans. So you can see the huge gaps, and just know that, you know, history tells us yet again, kind of before this crisis and during this crisis, that Black Americans and other people of color are particularly struggling. And this is an unprecedented economic downturn that we're in right now. I think it's important, it's a little more obvious to policymakers perhaps than it was a few weeks ago, that it is not going away anytime soon, and that reopening things is not only not smart public health policy, but that it's not going to, quote, solve our economic crisis here in the United States. So knowing that, to look, I want to dig in for a moment on specifically around kind of, in addition to the moratoria on utilities, which I think is incredibly important. A lot of folks have been protected by moratoria on evictions, but a lot of those are going away. The moratoria on evictions in federally backed properties ends in basically a week. And some of the other protections that state and local folks have enacted also expected to go away. So this just shows you the scale of people in the neighborhood of 20 million Americans who could be facing eviction by September. And part of this, of course, depends on what's happened with unemployment, but the latest data on unemployment, the experiences of people on the ground, certainly doesn't give us cause for optimism. And we know that a rise in cases is only likely to make things worse. We had an underlying housing crisis, but this has certainly been exacerbated. And again, it disproportionately impacts Black Americans, low income Black renters, and other people of color. In addition to kind of shocking information and real concerns around people's ability to keep a roof over their head, I want to underscore also the levels of food insecurity and how much that, yet again, is disproportionately harming people of color. So you can see here kind of trends over time. This is based on the data that the Census Household Pulse Survey puts out. I put a link to it in the chat earlier so you can see kind of real time and play with the data. It's broken down by state, by race and ethnicity, by households with children, et cetera. But you can see how much overall the lesson here is families with children, especially young children, are more likely to be food insecure before and during this pandemic, but that in particular households of color with children are particularly at risk. And if anything, when you look at the latest data, it only seems to be going up after kind of at least remaining somewhat stable over the first few months of the pandemic. So I want to offer that update and then really talk about the dynamics of what could be happening here and the timing. So here's Senate leadership. Ultimately, next week, so right now, Mitch McConnell is working on kind of finalizing his package. So he's actively working with his Senate Republican colleagues to introduce a partisan package, most likely next Tuesday over their caucus lunch, kind of saying, here's what I have. And I think we'll kind of hear details of that will be leaked. When it goes public, I think next week, but when it goes public will in part depend on what folks think about it as he familiarizes his colleagues with it. And this is a deliberate, you might be wondering like, wow, we're in a crisis here and they haven't done anything for months. This is a deliberate strategy by the Senate Majority Leader to kind of strengthen his hand in final negotiations. He is well aware that the extra unemployment benefits expire and some of the other measures expire. And so by kind of pushing off action, he is trying to up the odds that what he wants will be in the final package. So I just want to be real clear on that. It's not like Congress couldn't do anything the last few months, but instead it's going to be fast and furious over the next few weeks. So it's going to be a 5-corner negotiation. So that's why in all the presentations already, you heard about the importance of House and Senate leadership, of folks going into the negotiating table to advocate for the things that are really important for communities across the country and around the world. I think part of the dynamic there is, the House has passed a proposal that costs $3 trillion, and the Senate Majority Leader is talking like he doesn't want it to be more than $500 billion to maybe $1 trillion. So they're kind of aware that everyone won't get what they want. So making sure that the things that are most important are top on the list. One other thing I want to mention about messaging, because it relates to Mayor Roberts' point earlier, I think Mitch McConnell is kind of spinning this proposal as we're really focused on getting kids back to school, people back to work. There might be, in the neighborhood of something like $70 billion focused on K-12 education, and then that would go to states and localities. And there might be a spin there that says, okay, now we've taken care of kids. We've put in some money for schools. That's all state and local governments are all set. Clearly the scale of what's needed in terms of states, cities, counties, et cetera, is much bigger than $70 billion. There are needs that go way beyond just some resources that help schools, quote, reopen. So I want to make sure folks understand that framing that we might see. And, there's a similar dynamic in some of the other pieces around food assistance, et cetera. I'm happy to talk more about that. So they are trying to finish this whole thing up within 2 to maybe 3 weeks. So this is going to be really intense once we see proposals come out, the proposal kind of come out next week. I hope one of the takeaways right up front, I hope anyone, especially if you're lucky enough to have a senator who actually has voting power, which I don't because I live in Washington, D.C. But if you have a senator, especially a Republican senator, I hope you get off this webinar and communicate your priorities to them, because they can have a lot of influence on kind of what's put out in the next few days. After that, it's important for all of our policymakers, we can advocate as constituents to make sure all these folks are hearing from their colleagues as they're doing some intense negotiating. So I'll just highlight results requests specifically, but obviously y'all have heard about many others too. So our top push is around $100 billion in emergency rental assistance, and that should be coupled with a 12-month national moratorium on evictions. Both of those provisions were included in the House passed legislation. The second piece we are specifically pushing, I hope folks will join us, is boosting increased food assistance via SNAP by increasing the maximum benefits by at least 15%. Joel included in the information and related to this call about a rolling day of action next Monday on food assistance. So there's ways to engage on that. Next Tuesday is a day of action on emergency rental assistance and housing needs. So it kind of leads well into the Wednesday day of action that was mentioned around water, utilities, broadband, et cetera. And then the other piece that we are engaged in is-
Lynn, I need your help. Drop what you're doing.
I hope that was not to me. But the last piece, and folks could mute, that'd probably be smart, is we are pushing also for expansions of critical tax.
Hello, I'm down here. Hello.
Greg, can you mute, please?
I just muted him.
Okay, good.
I'm trying.
Okay, good. Is a boost in the earned income tax credit for low-income workers, especially.
Doesn't matter. Everything's going wrong.
In the
I have no sound. I'm supposed to speak to this group of election activists.
Greg, we can hear you, so please put your thing on mute.
I don't think he can
Now I'm
hear
in the
us.
meeting, but no sound. Period. Can someone
I'm not having
unmute me just so I can hear what's going on? Question mark.
Oh, my Lord, wait a second. Sorry, guys. All right, I figured it out. He's muted. Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, great. All right. Sorry, tax policy. Just one.
Can you
a quick
guys hear
point
us?
on that.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Yes, we can hear you.
Go ahead.
Great. All right, the last piece I would mention on tax policy, sorry about that, is we're looking at expanding both the earned income tax credit for low-income workers who don't.
Hello, can anyone hear us?
Yeah, we can, and you're disrupting the meeting, so please put your phone on mute.
I'm muted.
Please put your phone on mute. You've
Can't
been.
hear a fucking thing.
Hey, Paul, you might have to.
Okay. Am I off on system? Is my system off?
So you
Okay,
can
hold on.
I'm gonna have to take him out of the meeting. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's okay. We'll get it right. We're gonna get it right. It's all good. It's just
Okay.
technology, man.
Go ahead, Meredith.
Okay. And also on tax policy, there's an opportunity, and again, this was included in the House passed legislation, to make sure that the child tax credit is fully refundable. So it's outrageous, and especially outrageous right now, that children in the lowest income families do not get the full value of the child tax credit. And these kinds of changes, if Congress was to do them now, could be a really important stimulus, really targeted at the lowest income workers and families in early 2021, when we all know that families are still going to be struggling. So that's one other piece that our network is pushing for to be included. One other thing I'll mention, this long-time strategy of results is to kind of reinforce, amplify these requests in local media. So our network of advocates have had hundreds of media pieces published across the country. It's certainly, if you've been in communication with your senator or your representative and you want to reiterate and put some more pressure on them, I urge you to think about media, especially the next few days while they're still home before they travel back to Washington. So we've got tools to help folks with that. So with that, I'll just flag that we have some resources, and we can share the links to all of these with everyone else, and invite folks to, if you want to engage specifically on some of these issues I mentioned, along with some advocacy on global health, global nutrition issues, to you can sign up to learn more through a volunteer orientation. So that's what I wanted to review. Hopefully it made sense.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Wow, that was tour de force. Thank you so much. We completed all the speakers in the first hour, as I committed to do. So thank you to all of you. We have another 30 minutes left, and the first hand that was up was from our dear colleague Alan Minsky from Progressive Democrats of America. So if Alan is still on the line, we're gonna.
Yep, I'm here, Paul.
Okay, yeah, we can't see your face though.
Oh, I'm in my backyard. Is that okay? I'm walking around. Should I sit and be? I should put my image on. I shall do that.
We'd like to
as best I can. Hey, Paul. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions really quick. First of all, is Professor Sachs still on the line? I believe he is gone. Correct?
No, he was only available for the first half hour.
Okay, I'm very interested, and I'll reach out to him and Sonia about whether he has been in contact at all with which Democrats in Congress and Democratic leadership at all on the issue of, unified public health response. It's certainly a brilliant idea, and I know if I was an elected official in the United States of America, I certainly would want to leave that as part of a legacy, especially in terms of this crisis. It's a brilliant idea. So just for everybody on the call, and Paul, maybe I'll ask your assistance in this to reach out to Jeffrey and see where that is. I do want to share with the group that oddly, this is uncommon for Progressive Democrats of America. We went through a lobbying volley a few weeks ago to all Republican senators. So we have an up-to-date list of all, as I'm sure many people on the list do, of all the legislative directors of the Republican senators, and I'll share that through Paul to share with the list. We were doing that around the student debt inclusion, we may do that again, but I actually wasn't really planning on making general comments. I just wanted to ask that question to Professor Sachs right at the top. But since I have the mic at the moment, I just want to offer up two thoughts. One is last time when these are effectively omnibus bills that go through, and I think Jim from Food and Water Watch said that he's correct. I think it is important, as many people suggested, that we contact all of the elected officials we can, especially elected officials we have relationships with, and try to understand where some maybe important members are, and to do so with all the Republicans in the Senate. But Jim is correct in that these things really do get worked out through leadership. And I think even with the White House looking over the shoulder of the process. And last time what transpired, my sort of analysis of it, was the public's eye was kept on some very important balls that were in the air. In particular, Senator Sanders taking to the floor to defend the $600. Remember, there was a pushback against that. And what that did is it kept everybody's eyes away from what I think was McConnell's great gift to his clients and the achievement of their primary goal, which was to create new rules for a Fed window, which allowed not $400 billion, but $4 trillion to be available to U.S. corporations, basically setting an absolutely unprecedented operation for the Fed. And I just think that's in McConnell's game plan always. I think there'll be a lot of focus on certain very key issues, probably with major macroeconomic consequences in terms of money in people's pockets, and the public will be kept away from many things that are being washed away. So the second thought is just around siloing. I really want to applaud Paul for bringing up the issue of trying to keep our issues unsiloed. I think we are, and to bring them together and to unify them. I think this is a paradoxical moment because we have these effectively omnibus bills where everything are brought together, but in some respects that makes it more difficult for us to provide solidarity because in a regular context, of course, these bills come to a head more individually. So I'm looking forward to your notes, Paul. Will notes come out from this meeting, Paul? They will. Is that correct? No? There are no notes?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to send all the links that people provide to me. I've already sent out one first version of that, and there's many more in the chat that I will excavate and then put that out to everyone. But it won't be, and then we'll make the video available online through a YouTube link. So there's no note for the record.
Sure. Sure. Actually, everybody was concise, and maybe I'll get myself and an intern at PDA to go through because it's very important for us to provide solidarity for all the organizations because the nature of what we're going into in this battle is, we're probably going to be faced with some serious triage from what gets cut out and what doesn't. Obviously, this relates to the goals and aspirations of many of the organizations on the call, and certainly we, as a general issue organization, and all of PDA's, both PDA's positions and our partnering C4 lobbying organizations will be in solidarity with everyone on the call and try to keep us out of silos and unified. But it's going to be an interesting and very dynamic few days going forward. So thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Alan, for stepping up. And I'm committed to that, and I know Joel is, and we're happy to support you in trying to help us triage and help pull this together. I do also want to quickly respond to your Jeffrey Sachs's call for a public health bill and to your view, Alan, about that. And really just to shout out Professor Phil Harvey, who worked with me and many others when this U.S. National COVID Emergency 19 Response Group first formed. Our first action was we developed the Saving People's Lives Act, which was a public health emergency response bill. And I know Russell and others on the call have helped bring that to members of Congress. It is something I just sent out again. Probably needs to be updated based on the last couple months, but it still stands as like what we think is needed, a federal secretariat, a federal leader, and a whole coordinated response around testing, contact tracing, and isolation programs, which we should have been doing since February. And we're still now in July not having done that effectively. So we have work to do. I know the next hand up was with Greg Palast. Greg, apologies. We could hear everything you were going through. So,
oh no!
Yes, if you could just give us 2 minutes, and then I really want to open it up for questions and dialogue with the.
Yeah, well, I have a question, so that's why I would like you to open it up. So yeah, I'm trying to deal with the computer issues and domestic life. But at any rate, what I'm concerned about, and people know, I think some people know, I just put out a book this week, How Trump Stole 2020. And there's a chapter in there called Mail-in Madness. I'm very concerned about mail-in voting. I'm not against it. What I want to talk, that people misunderstand, I'm not against mail-in voting, but there's been such just an omerta on the left about the problems of mail-in voting, which we have to fix. And here's what I'm concerned about. According to the MIT, the most important study on mail-in voting, whose absentee ballots are lost, 22% of all mail-in ballots are never counted. 22%, over 1 in 5. This is not small. 3.3 million ballots, mail-in ballots, are not counted in 16. Hillary's presidency is in that dumpster. And if it were random, well, okay, but it's not. According to the Caltech MIT study on voting, their investigations, overwhelmingly, it's young voters and voters of color whose ballots are not counted. And I just spoke with the ACLU of Georgia, the head of the ACLU of Georgia, Andrea Young, her husband, she asked for absentee ballot 45 days in advance. He got his ballot before the primary ballot on June 10. The primary was June 9. So when the head of the ACLU, a Harvard law graduate, can't get a ballot, this is a problem. About 1 in 10 people who ask for ballots, about 1 in 9 people who ask for ballots, according to MIT, never get them. According to the US government, the number of people who don't get ballots who request them is even higher than 1 in 9. About 1/3 of all military personnel who request the ballot don't get it. Now,
Ray, can I just pause you for a second? I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want you to know that as part of the COVID-19 emergency response group, we formed since April, we helped spark and spawn the National Election Protection Network and Coalition.
Right.
And they have weekly calls. The next call is at every Monday at 5 p.m. Many of the people on this call are part of that, and everyone is working on these issues. So I think this call is really seen as, we don't want to go down the rabbit hole of all this because we're all on this other effort. Now, you're raising really good points. I think what that call does not do, which is they're not working on federal legislation about what needs to be in the COVID relief package.
And that's exactly right. So I think we need help for the states and guidance for the states. And of course, a lot of states are simply hostile, like Georgia, Ohio, the legislature in Wisconsin, et cetera. If you've been purged, 16 million people have been purged, you can't get your mail-in ballot if it's not mailed to you. We got millions of ballots that are never sent to people.
Yeah.
And in addition, once they're sent in, about 1 in 10 mail-in ballots is technical reasons. Someone challenged their signature. Remember, Trump's going to have 50,000 volunteers out there challenging ballots and trying to declare a fraud. So I think one of the things for the states is how can we get funds for the states to help people get their ballots, fill them out properly, and get them counted. And obviously, we need rules to get that done, but also activist groups. But the states simply don't have even the ability. Those who don't want to screw you out of your vote still don't have the resources for this mail-in voting.
Yeah, so the Emergency Election Protection Network call, thanks Steve for putting that up. And so there is the Brennan Center, which has a specific legislative proposal focusing on the election protection. And there are bills in the Senate on that as well. So we have hands up now. So Ruth and then Joel. And we're going to really end on time at 2:30. So we have about 18 minutes.
Hi. First of all, Paul, you have been wonderful to organize all of this. I can't, tell you how great it is and how important it is. My point is that this is my opinion, I don't want to see things get too diluted talking about international things and environmental things at this point. The most crucial thing is the absolute abnegation of responsibility by Congress in letting, the banksters run away with all the COVID money. And now people are really, really, on the line in terms of their jobs, in terms of their unemployment insurance, as you know, utilities, food, et cetera. So I'm just saying that as an organization and COVID response, I think our main focus at this point needs to be on the urgent need of getting people more stimulus money and making them secure. And I also got something from Economic Policy Institute today that I'll pass on to you about, you know, how many people aren't getting their insurance checks state by state, and what kind of, you know, resources they have or don't have. So anyway, that's my plea. Let's keep the focus on immediate needs, and then the rest can be taken care of later. And there are also a lot of other organizations focusing on that. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Joel?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Greg Powell, who is the world's leading progressive journalist, not only in Europe, but in America. And the point that is so important about his book is that if we do not change the political party in the Congress and the White House, the same disastrous COVID-19 policies that are killing us are never going to change. And I think that's why what he said is very, very important. If we don't stop voter suppression and voter purging, we can elect Trump. I know that sounds impossible, but it's not. And McConnell. That's point number one. Point number two, I hope we can, as co-convener and co-founder of this incredible group, if we can focus on action, what are we going to do as activists to influence this HEROES Act? And I'm going to just give two suggestions. Back when Paul and I were working on the emergency response to global HIV/AIDS, we got stuck in Congress. We could not pass the PEPFAR bill. That was, what was it, Paul? $15 billion we were trying to get so there would not be a Holocaust in Africa and the Caribbean. And Paul and I brought in Bono. I think everybody knows who Bono is, right? The rock star Bono. Bono single-handedly went to the Republicans in the Senate and then prayed with George W. Bush and said, we got to pass PEPFAR. I really think we got Greg Powell, who not only is he a celebrity, but he knows celebrities. And I see some other names here. We need celebrities to shame and embarrass McConnell and Trump into doing the right thing on COVID-19. We are a People magazine, celebrity crazy nation, but we have not heard from the celebrities on this issue. When tens of thousands of people are dying, there are no excuses. We need Hollywood celebrities. We need dignitaries. We need world leaders. This is the time for everybody. Please check, be Buddhist, check your ego at the door, and let's save some damn lives. Okay, that's my last point is real simple. We need a civil society task force that I think should be chaired by Dr. Walter Sue, the former past president of the American Public Health Association, where we come up, and Phil Harvey, of course, should be on this. We come up with our own public health plan because Phil's already got it. Then take it to the Progressive Caucus, take it to the Black Caucus, then give it to Biden. And that's how Congress works. How do I know? Because I worked there for 13 years. Power only respects power. We create the plan. We go to the Progressive Caucus and CBC Hispanic Caucus. We push it on to the Democrats, Republicans. We do press conferences. That can't work unless we go out of our silos. And I'll close by saying Walter Sue is not only a cool guy with a great backdrop of Philadelphia. If you're the past president of the American Public Health Association, we can make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Okay, folks, so we have an open mic now. So we have a few minutes left, and I just want to, we're processing all this information. I think next week is a critical week. It looks like we have a 2 to 3 week window where the Senate will be bringing forward their legislation. There'll be a back and forth with the House. I heard the Congress might delay their August recess, so this might flood into the first week of August. But it's going to move fast and it's going to be crazy. So we heard that there are actions being implemented next week by all the coalitions, public advocacy that Jean Sue talked about, and mobilizations Meredith talked about, massive effort. Shanice is Truth Week next week. So Congress is going to be bombarded with voices, but it's a cacophony. And so I think that's the challenge that we're facing. And I think we're also heading towards the Democratic and Republican conventions, and then of course the fall election season. So we have a lot of different things going on. So again, like how can we support each other next week and in the next 3 months is the question. So I'm opening it up now. If anyone has thoughts or ideas, we're open. It's open idea time. Walter, I don't know. Phil, do you have any? I mean, Walter, you have been asked to lead something. Phil, you have been working on this stuff, and I know you're preparing another expert call. So you want to brief us about that, Phil? And please let me know if you want to say anything.
Okay, yeah, hi, thank you, Paul. One of our next Friday calls is going to be dedicated to the economics of the response to the dual crisis, the public health emergency and the recession. And we're going to have a group of economists who are going to try and explain why we don't have to worry about the money it's going to cost to do it right. It's really not a problem. And so people should try and learn the basic facts as to why it's not a problem so that they can respond to people's queries when they say, oh, it sounds like a good idea, but who's going to pay for it? How much will it cost? So forth. So stay tuned for that. And in terms of the legislation, all I can say is that I hope that the Saving People's Lives Act, which we drafted back in early April, will get re-forwarded to Democratic members in Congress who are either in the leadership or can call it the attention of the leadership, because it is the missing element in the HEROES Act. And we've got a piece of legislation just ready to plug in as another division or title, however they organize the bill. So I hope that that will get done.
Thanks, Phil. I will put the link to that in the chat, and I think it's something that I'm going to follow up with Alan Minsky on that and see if PDA can help us find a champion. And I have already sent this to Barbara Lee's office, but this is like the kind of thing that I think she would also be, very interested in.
Happily so, Paul. Thank you.
Okay, so here is the Saving People's Lives Act in the chat. Oh, it didn't work. I'll send the link around. Mike, you're coordinating the Monday call. Do you want to just give us a quick update about that? If you're still on, Mike Hirsch, are you there? I think he had to drop off. Dr. Su, do you want to say anything or?
Well, I did comment in the chat that my great disappointment is how we've approached everything about this crisis except the public health aspects of it. And we all now realize that this economy will not come back together again until we actually address it like a public health crisis. The great frustration is people like other Asian countries, Thailand, Vietnam, South Korea, Taiwan, they've all basically brought their numbers down so low that they can actually have kids go back to school. And, people have faith in the public health workforce in trying to keep them safe. In America, we just don't trust that. We have this enormous disbelief about masks as if half the nation forgot high school biology. So I find that it's incredibly frustrating in a diverse country like ours, which has long believed in individual freedom, that together, we have to work together to really stop this pandemic. And unless you stop the pandemic, you cannot get people back. I mean, the economy cannot open again. You can't have sports. You can't have restaurants. You really can't have schools. And people need to get smart about this. So the one good thing about this new outbreak that's happened in the Sunbelt states is that people are starting to realize that maybe Trump was not right, that sunlight and the summers somehow or another are going to make it mysteriously go away. It's actually looking like maybe the scientists really know what they're talking about. And as Winston Churchill once said about America, Americans manage to do the right thing after they try all the wrong things first. And we're sort of experimenting with all the wrong things first. And I hate to say it, but we can do this again, but it will require us to lock down the country for 2 more months. And we have to float the economy for 2 more months if we want to get close to what they've done in other Asian countries.
Okay.
And nobody likes to hear that.
No, I think it's a good point, and I share your frustration. I think we know that the administration, it's not by happenstance that this chaos has been caused, right? It's linked to a strategy that's linked to re-election. So I think we've touched on all those issues. I think the Biden campaign does have a COVID task force. I think there is, I think we might have to wait till January to get an effective response if we don't like lose the election and lose the democracy in the middle. So, but I wanted to just thank everyone on the call that has been here and all those listeners that are watching this on YouTube and Facebook. We've had experts from across the movement, folks working on justice, saving people's lives, and working at the global level, the national level, at local and city and county level. We have the opportunity to heal America, to end the COVID pandemic, to restore our climate, to create a just and fair, equitable economy, and to heal America from its racial justice scourge. So we have to build that movement to solve all these challenges at the same time. This incremental, slow throttle is not working. So thank you for your leadership, everyone, and look forward to collaborating with you. We'll be back in 1 month for our August update from the U.S. National COVID-19 Emergency Response Group. Have a great week ahead. Peace.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul.
Bye, everyone. I'm going to stop recording.
Thanks.